Okay, thanks everyone for joining us today. We have some big ideas in UX, some kind of like patterns of design, some trends that we've been seeing, and our presentation today will hopefully give you some idea as to whether to adopt these for your own projects or your own websites. So we'll introduce ourselves before we get started. I'm Suzanne Dergacheva. If you haven't met me yet, I'm one of the co-founders of Evolving Web, and I've played many hats since starting this company 18 years ago. I've been a developer. Now I work more as a strategist. I used to do a lot of front-end stuff and teach Drupal and do WordPress and all kinds of things. And I'm excited to have Bruna with me here too.
Yeah, I'm Bruna Siqueira-Davis, and I'm a senior strategist at Evolving Web. So my hats also see many, but maybe not as wide of a reach. But research, content strategy, information architecture, that's kind of all my little world, I guess.
So I know you're at a conference hosted by Evolving Web, so you might have already gleaned that we are a full-stack web agency, but we just wanted to highlight we work with a lot of different types of clients at Evolving Web, so a lot of universities, government, public sector, also a couple big insurance companies, and nonprofits. And so as strategists, it's fun because we get to work across like different domains and dig into different types of challenges. And yet we see these big kind of questions coming back again and again across websites because of course people are looking to build a website that's predictable, but that also is kind of like catered to the needs of their specific audiences. And so these are the topics we're going to cover. I'm going to do a few and Bruna's going to take a couple, and hopefully this will give you some food for thought, and we're going to show lots of examples. So if nothing else, you'll take back maybe some kind of benchmarks to use for projects. So the first kind of trend that I've seen kind of ebb and flow in my career in websites is what to do with navigation. So I think from the first big project I took on for a large hospital, we were talking about flattening navigation, and there always seemed to be this issue with big institutions having really hierarchical navigation and how to make that easier for people to use. And so I just want to talk through this whole idea of having a mega menu. How many of you have designed a mega menu, or you have a big mega menu on your website? I kind of define a mega menu as something where when you open up one of the drop downs in a menu, it's not just a list of links, it's more than that. It's trying to really communicate something with you. So when I see this mega menu on the Oxfam website, for example, it's not just a list of links, it's actually giving you a lot of information, like a whole summary of the section that you're in. There's so many links. There's even a call to action that's emphasized, the Give Now link, this is what you should really pay attention to. And there's quite a few links there to go through as well. There's room in the mega menu for a lot. Similarly, this is actually recently redesigned, University of Toronto, I think. Sorry, Emma's in the room. And I really like this mega menu because there's a lot of links, but they're actually organized. So there's something else communicated just about the hierarchy itself. And there is this visual over here, like a block that's been placed, but it's quick. It's kind of giving you a sense of what the most important part of this section of the website is, and this focus on programs. So I like anything that's helping us emphasize what's the most important. And my third mega menu example is a website that we designed at Evolving Web. It's for the Royal Ontario Museum, so if you're headed to Toronto this summer, you should check out the ROM. And I really like it because one of the top things, of course, you're going to do on any museum website is just figure out when is it open, when can I go there. And the opening hours are displayed many places throughout the website because we don't want you to even have to click once to get the opening hours. And one of the places that we have that is in the mega menu. There's also a couple of visuals, but it's not crammed with links. It's more light, and there's, of course, the drop down of links within the section of the website that you can get access to. And so if you're considering designing something like this and you think, oh, should we have a mega menu? Should we go with something simpler? I think the question really to ask is more about what kind of wayfinding strategies you need on your website. So it's less a question of like, do I want to build a mega menu or not? And more about what kind of pathways do you need to put through your website to best get users to that information quickly. So wayfinding, is a big topic, but navigation, like building out your main nav, for example, that's not the only way that users have to get to information through your website. There are actually other wayfinding options. So first of all, if you want users to find a piece of information, you could just put it on every single page of your website, right? Like that's what we do with contact information in the footer. We just stick it there on every single page. It's also what we do when we build like an alert or notification at the top of a page. We can have navigation, but there are other things than the main menu that we can link to things. We can have calls to action, related links, listings pages, breadcrumbs, things like that. And then we can hide things a little bit more. We can say, oh, well, you can access it through the search. Of course, you can find it. So the strategy that you want to use really depends on the experience that you need to build. And so one example of this is the innovation.ca website. So here I've just snippeted out the main nav that you can see. But this is a website that's primarily for researchers looking at how to fund their projects. So if you're doing like some fundamental research and you need to build a big lab and spend millions of dollars on it, you're going to go to innovation.ca to find out how to fund the project. So you can imagine that this website, there's some information for us, members of the public, like where is all my taxpayer money going to? That's why you might go to funded projects or about us. But if you're actually a researcher, there's a lot more information here for you and to view like the specific funding opportunities. So this section of the menu is more built out. There's more links under Apply and Manage Your Awards than there are under Funded Projects and About Us. So this is just to show that your mega menu doesn't have to be one size fits all. If you build out a big drop-down box container for links, you don't have to fill it up for every single section of your site because your navigation might not be symmetric. You might not have the same amount of content in each section, and that's fine. Another thing that you can do, this is a screenshot from the same website. Not everything has to go into your main navigation. When we did the kind of user journey mapping, when we mapped out the experience of users on this website, it was nobody's main task on the website to go and look at what research topics innovation.ca is really like showing leadership on. So that being said, it was one of the goals of the project that people find out about the big research themes that they have leadership in and kind of what the thought leadership areas are. So we wanted this information to be in front of users, but if we put a link to it in the main navigation, we didn't really think anyone would click on it. So instead, we took it out of the nav, we freed the nav up for other more important things, and we built this more into user journeys by placing it on different landing pages in a strategic way. So figuring out what goes in the main menu is important, but it's also important to have good reasons to pull things out. Another thing you can do to free up your navigation is to think about what the primary audience is for your main nav and focus on speaking to them. So on a lot of university websites, we're speaking primarily to prospective students. So this example is Red Deer Polytechnic, the new design we launched with them last year. And their main nav is speaking, every single main menu item, it has to be speaking to prospective students and it has to resonate with them. But then we could see that there were some really important journeys for, alumni, donors, Indigenous students. We had these other targets that we didn't want to alienate, so we pulled out information for them and put it into a persona-based navigation. So the main nav is more a bit more task-based. We have, programs, admissions. These are nouns you can kind of associate with. But then the information for persona-based nav has good pathways to kind of wayfinding landing pages that have all the top links for those personas. Making main nav decisions is a lot of work. So you might consider, before making some big changes, to do tree testing. It's one of the favorite kind of user research things we recommend because the cost is relatively low. And I'm not talking about the cost of like hiring an agency to do usability testing, but more the cost of just like getting users to sign up to do some testing, because tree testing, you can do a link, you can collect some easy quantitative results, and it's pretty fast to analyze those and make decisions. So you can decide, does this nav perform better than that one in terms of just the links that are in place and the labels. And so my big takeaways for mega menus or other kinds of navigation, it's not so much that I advise always build a mega menu or never build a mega menu. It's more like before you decide what design to do, figure out the user journeys that you want to optimize for. And then overall, creating a big mega menu, like changing everything in your main nav, could be really expensive. It's a lot easier to just move links around. So most content management systems are going to let you, configure where your links appear, what the labels are. Those kind of changes are pretty easy to make. And then before you make big changes, though, doing tree testing is great, because as you can imagine, moving things around in your main navigation can be confusing to users and throw them off. So doing tree testing beforehand can just prevent having to make too many changes on your live site. Okay, my next big topic is storytelling content. Who here has made an effort to create more storytelling on their website in the last couple of years? Storytelling, yeah, digital storytelling. It's something that comes up often. We hear like, oh, we have to make the website more engaging. We need to add more images. We need more video content. That's something I've been hearing a lot today. And a lot of times when we get this advice or when we have this as a goal, really what we're trying to do is avoid having big walls of text. We don't want websites that are just long, paragraphs of text. Nobody thinks that this is a good idea. So what do we have instead? We have mixed, media. We try and create things that are interactive. And we try to create a combination of different layouts. Even here in these slides, right? I'm trying to give you slides with some different layouts to keep you all interested. And I think that there's a trade-off that we make when we design our content between giving a lot of flexibility to content editors and marketers in how they communicate versus content compliance, like having really strict templates so that we make sure that the content is accessible and follows the brand. And every website is going to strike a balance between these two things. When we design content for storytelling, we're often thinking about designing a whole set of components. So when I talk about components, I mean like these distinct areas of the site that have us take content and put it in a certain layout and follow a certain design. So when we're designing components, we're often thinking about, I'm going to design, an image card, I'm going to design a CTA, I'm going to design a video section, and it's up to my content editors to combine these. And so I think, okay, we have components, therefore we have storytelling content. But really, a lot of the value of storytelling content isn't in the distinct components, it's in how they get combined to actually tell a story. And so the work, yes, it's a bunch of work to design some pretty components, but it's also a lot of work to decide that they should go in this order on this page, and that the text should follow a certain order to get the user to the right place where they're going to click on the call to action that we want them to take the next step. And so storytelling content is expensive not because of the components themselves, but because of the work it takes to create and maintain this type of content. So, versus a few paragraphs of text, a page like this that has, about 7 components on it, it's more work to create it. There's a lot more clicks involved in the back end. It's work to design. Even if a designer is not involved, somebody had to decide, okay, this first component is going to be more saturated. I want to have some white space. I need to have, a balance of the number of calls to action I'm going to place on the page. And then the work is also in the fact that to design a website like this, to make this content searchable takes a little bit more effort. If you ever wanted to migrate it to another content management system, it would be more effort. And then to update the page, the editor has to find, where to update each piece of text. So it just gets to be expensive to create every single page as a storytelling page. And so a few things that we can do, I'm going to skip to the next one. One thing that we can do to make it easier to infuse our website with storytelling content is to look for patterns. So this is an example from the OCAD University website. They have these program pages. I really like this, the content on this site because they put a lot of effort into their videos for their programs. It doesn't capture it just with a screenshot, but they're very experiential. And then there is a template for the programs, but the template allows for enough flexibility for editors to, decide how much content to put into each area. And then they're also encouraged to tell a story by putting in a student profile here. So you have to follow a template. It's not as much decision making for the content editor, but they are encouraged to tell a story with the template that they have. Another thing to think about with storytelling content is just to focus on the most important areas of interactivity for the website. So one of the things I mentioned at the top was about storytelling being associated with interaction and the user actually being able to customize the experience as they go. So this is from the Bonjour Quebec website. It's a map that is used in some parts of the website to search, but it can also be used to plan a travel itinerary. So you actually can kind of construct where you want to go on your vacation. And so by prompting users to interact, you're helping them kind of build their own story into the content. And then I was talking about templatizing storytelling. This is a website for Northwest Territories Parks. And it has a page on the website for these different road trips that you can take. So if you're going to travel to the Northwest Territories, you're probably going to visit some national parks. It's pretty inevitable. There are great places to stop on the way. And so this website has these road trip pages. And so by nature, they're storytelling because it's telling you what you can do at each step in your trip, on your road trip. But they needed to be flexible because not every single road trip has the same types of content in it. Like sometimes there's more directions, sometimes there's more parks than others. But it's limited in its flexibility. So it's giving authors the template for a road trip, but the number of components you have on that type of page is not unlimited. It's not like you have 45 components to pick from. It's like, here are the 2 or 3 types that you can combine depending on the amount of content. So limiting the flexibility makes it a bit easier for the content editors and lends itself better to some consistency. And finally, you might choose just one area of your website to focus on to create an interaction that is a bit more dynamic. So this is from a website for Skilled Trades BC. It's a website that helps people get into the trades if it's not something they've considered before. Like they might, it's going to connect you to get an apprenticeship or to take training so that you can start a new career. And so it has a little quiz in it to help you find your trade. So if you don't come from a family where the trades is a thing and you're not familiar with all the options, it's going to help walk you through it. And the reason that we picked this interaction is because it's the one place on the website we wanted to optimize that experience and help, greet it. Oops. I think it's still working.
Sure.
Let's just leave it.
Okay.
And so it wasn't like we went out and built a whole platform for creating quizzes. This is just one quiz. So it was kind of making best use of the investment we had in the site to create something useful. So storytelling content, some takeaways. You can be selective. Not every single page has to be a big page with 1 million components on it. Create templates for stories, for selected things like programs, parks, things like this. And then governance can be really helpful. So if you have a bunch of components you've designed, instead of just having documentation about what fields you have to fill in, like technical documentation, actually infusing some content strategy and talking about the purpose of the different components can be more valuable. Next thing I wanted to mention, to bring up is this trend of design systems. So who here has a design system? Anyone have a design system? Anyone here thinking, oh, I gotta go to this conference to figure out my design system? I think there were some other presentations specifically about this. But if it's not on your radar at all, so design system is basically documentation of reusable components that you can use across your channels, meaning like your website and other places where your brand is presented. And it's really helpful if you are using different content management systems or different platforms. And you can have a really, design system lends itself well to really strong brand documentation because it's this documentation for developers to go and take components and build them out in different ways. Also, it's good documentation for designers and strategists to know what's available and what we can work with, so we're not reinventing the wheel with every new project. But there's also a huge overhead of maintaining any kind of documentation, and design systems are particularly onerous to maintain. So you don't want to just build one for fun. Because design systems, we can look in Figma and see what buttons we have to work with as designers, but also then you have this whole set of code for developers that's associated with that design. And then the documentation on how and why to use it all. So it's a lot of work to put together and maintain, and it's like a whole other set of code and files in addition to your actual websites and channels. But it can be incredibly helpful if you have multiple brands, if you have different development teams. And so when you're thinking of how to create more consistency, design systems are one option, but you should really only undertake one if you have the need to have these different websites. So this is an example from Provincial Health Services Authority. It's a provincial, it's in British Columbia. They have websites for different health services. Some of more for patients, some of them are for healthcare providers, and so they just have different ways of presenting their brand, and the websites are quite the way that they're managed, like there are separate teams, and so they really did need this one centralized place where they could say, this is where everything is documented, and this is the be-all and end-all of our brand. But you don't have to design a design system. We also work a lot with York University, and they have something that's lighter than a design system called a digital experience hub. And it's lighter than a design system because it doesn't give you all the code examples for each component. It's not designed for just a developer to be able to come along and apply their designs to a new CMS. Instead, it's built more for site owners who can go and combine different types of components to create websites. And so it's more built for the audience that they have and the type of flexibility that their ecosystem accommodates. So you can start out with this word design system, but it doesn't have to be, you don't have to build a design system to get consistency and to provide the documentation that folks need. So I'm going to pass it off to Bruna, who's going to cover a couple more topics.
Yeah, excellent. So one thing that we hear a lot about from clients is like, what's the deal with chatbots and should we get one? So kind of the question that we have for here to address with you today is, so should you get one? And before we get into all of that, I kind of want to talk about what is a chatbot. So you're probably all familiar with like a little bubble that appears in the corner. You know, maybe it's a real human, maybe it's not. And there are lots of different types of chatbots, but two of the most common that we see are decision tree bots. So essentially, this is more of something that's very structured. We'll see an example in a second. But there's predefined questions and kind of scripted answers. So as an owner, right, of that chatbot, you know, your site owner, you get a little bit more control, but there's less flexibility for your users. So we see a lot of use for this, especially like, you know, IT help desks and things like that, when they're basic or repetitive questions that folks are constantly using and resources are constantly asking and resources are being burned, right, trying to answer those questions, that can direct them to the right team. The second, right, of course, is kind of the hottest topic right now. I know you probably in your other sessions have heard a ton about AI today. But the other, right, is kind of what they call an AI chatbot, which is more of a natural language processing bot. Right, so they have the ability to respond to open-ended questions, and they're often trained by, so ML is machine learning, and large language models. Now, for this, I think there's always this question when clients are considering, should I do this, should I not, of like, is it going to say something super inappropriate from a random place on the web? And you can train your chatbots, right, so the language model that it's kind of developing, you can control kind of what it's trained on. So natural language search, sometimes kind of, right, you can use your chatbot to function kind of like a search bar. And then virtual assistants, right? We all, I'm sure, either have used or at least are familiar with ChatGPT, and those are examples of virtual assistants. So these are just some of the common ones. Sometimes there is what they call a hybrid approach, where there's a little bit of both of these too. And that's another popular option. So the question, I think, really of should you get a chatbot boils down to kind of intent. So organizations really don't want to be left behind, right? And you're all here today trying to learn more, trying to learn techniques, taking notes. We want to be able to offer, right, the best customer experience for our clients, for our customers, for our users. And we also want to stay ahead of the curve, right? I think a lot of folks, especially when they're considering AI solutions, know that it's something that's a hot topic and they want to know, how can I take part in this? But it's something that you kind of have to consider. When we start a new engagement with clients, we typically, as an icebreaker, I'll say, like, tell me about your favorite digital product. And it could be anything, right? And I've had some personal, things that I answered before in that exercise versus some professional ones. But this one is an example of a chatbot that I think deserves its day in the sun. Full disclosure, these images were generated with ChatGPT. I was very impressed, actually. Anyways, but yeah. So anyways, I'm on the Evolving Web team, but I'm actually based in North Carolina in the US. So I've heard it's somewhat similar here, but I think it's done by month. When you have your car, every year you get a letter in the mail and you say, hey, it's time to register your car again with the government. And that's done through the DMV, so the North Carolina Department of Transportation. In Quebec, I think the equivalent is the SAAQ. And I've heard some stories about the digital experience there as well. So if you know, you know. If you don't, look it up. But I kind of asked my coworkers about the perception of the DMV, right, in Canada as a whole, but certainly here in Quebec. And has anybody here seen the movie Zootopia? Okay, I was hoping this wouldn't be a super niche reference, so that's good. In the movie Zootopia, it's a Pixar, Disney, DreamWorks, I'm not sure. But they go to the DMV, and basically, this was very funny at the time, I still think it's funny, the employees at the DMV, right, or the equivalent SAAQ, are sloths, right? So everything moves really slowly. And the guy who's there, like, he needs to get something done, he's like, come on, come on, come on. Anyways, so I think it's similar in the perceptions of both, that it can be quite sloth-like to have to go to the DMV, right? So lines are long, and actually in North Carolina, after the pandemic, our DMV moved to a appointment system, and often statewide, there are no appointments, right? They're booked out for 3 months at a time, and that's all that's available. So you can show up and wait in a super long line and hope that they have time to see you that day. Or sometimes, especially if you notice last minute, you need something, you're out of luck. Enter a superhero in the computer, and that's their current digital experience. So I'm not sponsored or paid in any way by the Pay It people, but this is the platform that they have built this on, and this was something that I think, obviously I always have a bit of my work hat on when I'm interacting with the web, but this was genuinely something that, like, I needed to use this for my real life, and I was really, really impressed, like, without the analytical hat, right? But basically, right, I get that letter, I need to register for a renewal. And what happens is it redirects you to a new page, and it kind of has almost like a mobile app experience, and it actually works the same on your phone. And it says, sure thing, right? So I had clicked on, I want to renew my registration. And it says, before we begin, let's make sure you have everything you need to renew. It gives me some, like, if you need a new plate, blah, blah, blah. But it gives me this very clear and visual checklist of what I need to have. One of the things that happens, that has happened to me before, is you go to the DMV, you looked at the website, you thought you had all the documents, you got there, you waited for 6 hours in line, and then you get to the front and they're like, you don't have what we need, and you have to leave and do it again another day. So essentially, right, it gives me some controlled options at the bottom to answer this question. So do you have this information handy? And I say, yes, let's renew. And essentially it says, okay, great. I'll need some info to help me look up your vehicle. So essentially what this is modeling is a human conversation, right, as if an agent was there to help me through the process, but it's virtual. So I'm able to enter the information that I want. So why do I, as a user, again, not with that analytical hat on, love this experience? It's convenient. It's simple to follow through the steps. It allows me to directly answer very specific questions. For me, that's important because if I'm given too much room, and this is just my personal... We'll see. There may not be a recording of this session. It gives me a little bit of, like, room to not really make mistakes, and it makes me feel supported, right? The language is very clear. The bottom line, right, it's a chatbot, and this one is more of those decision tree ones that's solving real problems for real users, and, right, it's cutting down on the actual resources needed to service, right, all of these folks who are coming in person. So, there are also times, and I'm not picking on AI, but there's also times when sometimes are the platforms that we're very familiar with will roll out AI features. So this is a screenshot short, but of Instagram. Who here uses Instagram pretty regularly? Okay, I see a couple hands, so that's good. I tried to check today to see if it was on there, and it wasn't on mine, but admittedly, I have kind of gone off of Instagram for a bit. But essentially, this came out, I don't know, maybe a year or two ago, and there was a lot of backlash because Instagram has a feature, for those who aren't familiar, who you click on a little tab at the bottom, and it takes you to the search. So you can search for other accounts, you can try to search for specific posts, right? It's searching all of the content on the platform. Well, Meta, right, I know there's probably been a lot of other talks about this. They have a great AI model, but they decided to put the Ask Meta AI in the search bar, right? That users has been the pattern on Instagram for a long, long time. They're very used to using. So Nielsen Norman, one of their kind of analysts, wrote, so right, it gives you some suggestions, right? Maybe you want, are you on Instagram looking for really hard trivia questions or the history of comedy? Maybe you want to learn how to write a memoir. Unlikely, right? There are platforms where maybe you want to do that, but Instagram is usually not it. So it's not really an evaluation of whether the AI is good or not. It probably is, but it's just, it doesn't make sense in this context, right? And that analyst says the only thing worse than a necessary AI chat is an unnecessary AI chat that blocks a useful feature like search. But as the old saying goes, even the best laid plans of mice and men often go awry. So I'm sure you have heard of this example. And, you know, whereas the last example was a bit of like maybe good model and, you know, bad placement, this was a case that happened with Air Canada recently of just, you know, things to consider as you're making these decisions. So essentially this was a person who was buying a ticket to go to, I believe, their grandmother's funeral. And they wanted to find out, and they used the bot, if they offered bereavement discounts. Now, Air Canada does offer bereavement discounts, but not retroactively. But if you see in the highlight, right, it says what the bot reports to them is that if you want to get a retroactive discount, just do it within 90 days. Request, a refund. And so the chatbot gave this fast answer, but it wasn't the right one. And obviously that was a failure in kind of the expectation of the user. The issue was also that when they tried to, use this as proof to say, hey, I want to use this, Air Canada said no. So the user took him to court. And at the end of the day, right, it only cost them about $800 Canadian that they had to give to him as a payment. To honor this policy. But it also became international news, which eroded trust in the brand, of course. And I think certainly has impacted, right, the collective discourse and public understanding about AI, whether fairly or not. And I don't share this story to criticize AI or to single out Air Canada. For all I know, right, for this one bad outcome, this bot helped hundreds of other people find information faster. But it's more about talking about the fact that your chatbot is only really as effective as the content, the structure, the governance, and the logic that you give it, right? Especially if it's leveraging something like AI. So, when one of those pieces falter, in this case the technology, no matter how advanced, it can still produce unexpected outcomes. So again, like I said, I can't assess whether they were doing all these things in the back end or not, right? For all I know, they were. But one of the things that I think I want us to consider as you're having these conversations about does a chatbot make sense for us or not, that you're considering risk, right? So in this case, it ended up being, they took a risk, and even the best models are still sometimes going to have edge cases that you can't account for. And so it's just considering, right, maybe there are better opportunities than others to deploy something like this. So maybe something that's high reward, right, for a user, but low risk for you as an organization. And those are the types of things, to kind of consider. So to go through it quickly, center user needs and account for the risks, right, that you're potentially taking. Any decision we make on the web is a risk, whether AI is involved or not. And you have to be, I think, a bit calculated and strategic about what you take. Train and maintain, I think, we're in this age where a lot of folks are being sold like an AI product and it's kind of delivered as a turnkey solution, but the reality, and I think most folks who work in this field will tell you it's not a set it and forget it. Models are constantly learning. You have to review kind of error logs and those types of things to kind of figure out how to shape it and move it forward. And then, it's really this idea of garbage in, garbage out, right? If you train your model, whether it's AI or even your decision tree, right, on bad content, that's what the output will be. Now, I think we have like 3 minutes, so I'm going to go through this quickly. Last is, does it make sense for your organization to adopt a product mindset? Have folks heard about this product approach to things? Are you guys familiar thinking about products? Maybe some folks? Okay. So I have a lot of definitions, don't worry. A product is something that your users are interacting with over time to solve a problem, complete a task, or get value, right? So we work, right, Suzanne and I, web design agency, we do design, we do development, we do strategy. But a lot of the things that we're creating, right, it's simple to say oh, it's a site, which it is, but it's also a product, right? And that could be a mobile app, a lot of different things, right? People are really actually interacting with these things to get something done. So if that's what a product is, then what's a product mindset, right? And it's an approach to managing digital experiences as an evolving and user-centered service, not a one-time project. So whereas the project mindset is something like a one-time launch, right? There's a fixed scope. The success is, yay, we shipped it, it's done. A product mindset, right, has an ongoing ownership, iterative improvements, and success means that it's working better over time and you're constantly evolving that. So why should you care, right? I think this is especially relevant for some